flower seeds can you sow in the garden in August? And I love August in the flower garden. It's a beautiful time of year when the garden is pretty much in full bloom. As I look around this patio area of my garden, I can see geraniums, I can see pansies, I can see fuchsias, I can see coleus, I can see marigolds, I can see petunias and sunflowers and a wonderful range of other flowers that are in full bloom. But when we get to August, it's a fantastic opportunity to sow flower seeds with a view to next year and how you can get an early colourful display right from spring into early summer and beyond. And in this video I'm going to share with you 11 fantastic varieties of flower seeds that I'll be sowing in August to help provide colour and fragrance to my garden in spring and in early summer. Now, like all of us, I'm sure you've got your favourites of flowers that you like to grow. And when we get to August, we need to change our mindset slightly to start to think about flowers that will be growing for spring and early summer of next year. Because when we're in August, we're sort of in the throes of summer, and that will go quite quickly, and it won't be long before we get into Octobers and Novembers when the temperature starts to cool down, and therefore we might start to get some frosts. And that's not good for most flowers. So therefore, when we choose what flowers we're going to sow in August, we need to start thinking about the word hardy. So when you look at your seed packets, if it's got the word hardy on the back, that means that those plants, when they grow a little, will tolerate some cooler temperatures. And that's exactly what we need for August. So with that in mind, I've gone through my seed box here and I've selected 11 varieties of flowers that are either hardy annuals, hardy biannuals, or hardy perennials. I'll explain what they all are as I go through the video. Now, before we start with any seed sowing video, it's always worth mentioning that I'm based in Growing Zone 8A, right in the centre of the UK. So therefore, your growing conditions and climate might vary from mine. Therefore, you may need to adjust your sowing times based upon your own local conditions. So the first seeds I'm going to recommend for sowing in August are a selection of hardy annuals. Now, a hardy annual is hardy, therefore it will tolerate some cooler temperatures, and annual meaning that it will last for a year. So in that 1 year, the seed will be sown, it will grow, it will flower, it will produce its seed, and then it will die. So these are 1 year flowers. Now, for most of the seeds I recommend, you can sow them directly into the ground. So if you are going to sow these seeds directly into the ground, you need to prepare the soil to a fine tilth and sow the seeds lightly onto the surface and just give them a very thin layer of compost over the top and then water them in. My issue I have is I've got limited space. As you can see, my flower garden is currently bursting with flowers and there's very little space in there at the moment. So for the vast majority of these seeds, I'm going to sow them either in quarter seed trays here, as you can see, or in these cell trays here. And then when my flower beds become available, when the current flowers start to die off and I need to replace them, I'll then transplant the tender seedlings into those spaces. Now, it's worth reminding ourselves that when we do sow these seeds that we're not going to get flower blooms this year. But what we are doing is growing the plants to a size where they're fairly well established, and then in most cases they'll be able to tolerate the outside conditions, and therefore when it comes to spring they're already going to be strong plants, and that's going to give us that wonderful early flowering in spring and early summer. Now, you're going to hear me saying that this is an absolute favourite of mine throughout the video because I just love flowers, and cornflowers is my first recommendation and a real favourite of mine. Fantastic flowers to grow. This is a tall mixed variety of cornflowers here, and this is a variety here called Double Blue, and the reason I'll grow the two of them is because the colours contrast absolutely wonderfully. Now, if you are going to sow these directly outside, they'll need germination temperatures of around about 10 to 15 degrees centigrade, which is about 50 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit. So if these are sown directly outside, you want to sow them in rows of about 30 centimetres, which is about 12 inches, to a depth of about 0.5 centimetres, which is about a quarter of an inch. Give them a light covering of compost and water. And because of the temperatures in August, they should germinate quite quickly in around about 14 to 21 days. As I mentioned, I am going to be starting mine off in cell trays because I haven't got the space at the moment. I will transplant them out as soon as I possibly can because I want them to establish before the cooler temperatures arrive. Now, my next recommendation, I know this is a favourite of a lot of you out there, is Calendula. An absolutely beautiful flower that is so easy to grow, and I've already got a fantastic display of these in my front garden, and I'll be making another sowing of these over the next few weeks in the middle of August. This is a variety that I tend to always go for. It's a variety called Art Shade Mixed, and it gives a very similar range of colours to marigolds, yellows and oranges, and it really brightens up the flower garden. Now, this is another hardy annual that will need germination temperatures of 15 to 20 degrees centigrade or 59 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit to germinate, and very similar in the way that I've just explained for cornflowers if you're going to sow these directly outside. This can be sown slightly closer together than cornflowers, around about 10 inches, so it's just under 1 foot, but at the same depth of 0.5 centimetres, quarter of an inch, and then water. So if you've never grown calendula before, definitely sow these. They're an absolutely fantastic flower and they grow really, really easily. Now, something I always remember from my childhood and a flower that my dad absolutely adored was wallflowers. And that's another flower that's perfect to grow in August. Now, the reason I like wallflowers is they're quite robust and they give quite a lot of structure to a flower garden. So where you would plan your flower garden to have maybe a cascade of flowers, then wallflowers would be one of the medium to tallish type of flowers, and therefore that could be a backdrop for some of the smaller flowers. And this is a flower that I'll be sowing in August. This is actually a hardy biennial, and a hardy biennial is a flower that will grow in the first year in terms of its roots, its stem, its leaves, but it won't flower until the following year. But these are great to sow in August because they can get established before the cooler temperatures come along, and they really provide a fantastic display to your flower garden in spring or early summer of the following year. Now, you can sow these directly outside just like the other flower varieties that I'm going to recommend, but as with the others I am going to be using my quarter trays or cell trays, and when they're large enough I'll thin them out and then eventually transplant them into their flowering positions when the space becomes available in my garden. This is a variety just called single mixed, and you can get a lot of flower varieties that are just called mixed and not any particular variety, and they'll just give you a range of different colours. This is particularly good because it does give quite a range of colours, so whereas some flower varieties might give you pastel colours of pinks and reds, which are reasonably similar, this will give you yellows and oranges and reds, so there's quite a good mix of colours in here, so it gives you an instant display when it starts to flower. Now, another fantastic flower that provides a complement to spring bulb displays is forget-me-nots. This is a variety called indigo, and this is a variety of almost a purple type of flower that really would contrast with things like tulips or daffodils and provides a really fantastic display. Now, these can be sown directly outside or in cell trays or modules, and if you are going to sow them directly outside, then sow them in rows at a distance of 15 centimetres or 6 inches. They'll germinate in around about 14 to 21 days, and when they're large enough, thin them out to around about 5 centimetres or 2 inches apart into their final positions. Now, like most other types of flowers, when they do start to establish, keep them moist and allow them to be weed free, and that will help them to establish through the cooler temperatures, and they'll be ready for a perfect display as soon as spring arrives. Now, the fantastic thing about the next flower I'm going to recommend is it really self-seeds easily, so when you've grown them you'll find that they'll start to pop up everywhere, and that is poppies. This is a variety called Double Angel's Choir, and again it gives a range of different colour mixes which are absolutely fabulous for the flower garden. These are perfect for sowing in August to once again help that flower display in spring and early summer. Now, you want to sow these really shallow, almost on the surface, and just give them a very, very fine covering of compost and give them a good water. These want to be sown in rows of around about 30 centimetres or 12 inches apart, and when they're large enough you'll thin them out into their final growing positions. Poppies do like sunny positions, so if you are going to sow your seeds, think about the location of where you're going to put them into a nice sunny spot. And if you let poppies grow on, they will start to produce seeds, and you'll find you'll get new poppy plants every single year. So poppies are a fantastic flower seed to sow in August. Now, another hardy annual that I love growing every single year, and also a flower that can be sown in August, is Nigella. This is a variety called Love in the Mist Miss Jekyll, and produces these wonderful pale blue flowers. But I just love the appearance of these blooms. They're very different to many other types of flowers and provide a fantastic contrast in the flower garden. If you are going to sow these directly outside, then sow them at around about 20 centimetres or 8 inches in rows, and then thin them out when they get a little bit larger. Ideally, they need to be spaced at around about 15 centimetres or 6 inches apart. But even though these are a hardy annual, in the harshest of temperatures they might need a little bit of protection, so they will tolerate cooler temperatures. But if you get a really hard frost, it might be worth covering these with a cloche or a bit of fleece just to protect those little seedlings. That's actually worth bearing in mind with a lot of the hardy annuals. So even though they will grow through cooler temperatures, if you have particularly cold temperatures in your area, it might be worth giving them that extra level of protection just to help them through the winter period. Now, a flower you'll see throughout the year in my garden is pansies. You'll find them everywhere. You'll see them in my flower beds, in hanging baskets, and I know that these are a real favourite of flower growers all around the world. And it's easy to see why. The colour range is absolutely fabulous. You can get pretty much any type of colour of pansy, and it does really add so much to your flower garden. And once again, I'm going to be sowing some pansy seeds in August to help me get that early display of flowers next year. Now, pansies need a germination temperature of around about 15 to 18 degrees centigrade or 60 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So August is a perfect month to sow them if you want to sow them outdoors. I'm going to be sowing mine in cell trays or modules and then thinning them out, and then eventually I will put them into their final positions towards the middle of September into October once they've established a little bit, and that will help them to harden through the winter period and to strengthen them for flowering during the following year. Now, there's so many varieties of pansies that you could potentially grow. This one that I'm going to be growing is just a mixed variety called Early Flower. It hasn't got a particular variety name on it, but the choice of pansies and the colours that you want to grow is really up to you. If you are going to sow your pansy seeds directly outdoors, prepare the soil, give it a fine tilt, and then gently place your seeds in your rows at round about 20 centimetres or 8 inches apart, and when they're large enough, thin them out to around about 10 inches or 4 centimetres apart. Now, the next recommendation I'm going to make for a flower to sow in August is hollyhock. This is a perfect flower for growing in borders or in little groups or clumps, and the good thing about hollyhocks, it does flower for a long time. Now, hollyhock does need a temperature of 15 to 20 degrees centigrade or 59 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit to germinate. So if you are going to sow these later outside in September or maybe early October, you might need to think about whether that's the best thing to do, because by that point the temperatures might not be at that level. So they might be worth starting indoors like I'm going to do. If we haven't got 15 to 20 degrees at the point I sow these seeds, I might start them in a heated propagator just to give them that germination boost. But what I'm going to do with hollyhock is I'm going to grow mine in pots, and I'm going to leave them in pots and keep them protected during the harshest frosts. When the temperature starts to warm up a little bit, I then will plant them outside because they are a little bit more sensitive than some other types of flowers. So actually starting them in cell trays and then transferring them to pots might be the best thing to do rather than plant these directly outdoors. And then when the cooler temperatures have gone, then you'll have some nice strong plants to take out and plant directly into their final positions. This is a wonderful variety of hollyhock called Halo Mixed, and it gives reds, whites, blues, purples, and a fantastic range of colours. Now, I will plant these in their final positions at 45 centimetres or 18 inches apart, which is quite a decent distance because they will need the space in order to grow fully. I mean, we really are spoilt for choice in terms of the type of flowers that we could potentially grow all year round. But another flower I absolutely love is a flower called Coreopsis. This is a variety called Early Sunrise. This flower is almost like a dahlia type of appearance, giving this really bright orange display, really vibrant. And like many other flowers, adds so much to the overall display. If you've not grown Coreopsis before, I'd definitely recommend that you might want to give this one a try. Coreopsis needs germination temperatures around about 15 to 20 degrees centigrade, 59 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit roughly. Just like I've mentioned for the hollyhock, you might need to give it a little bit of help because by the time that you get to late September, October, you might not have those temperatures and it's going to struggle to germinate. So you might need to start it off or give it a bit of help with a heated propagator. It should germinate in 14 to 28 days, and when they are large enough, I'll transplant them to around about 5 centimetres, 2 inches apart, still in the trays, and that'll give them space to grow until they're large enough till I transplant them outside into their final growing positions to be around about 30 centimetres or 12 inches apart. Coreopsis variety called Early Sunrise are another recommendation of flower seeds that you can sow in August. Now, I always try and experiment a little bit in my flower garden, particularly with flowers or varieties that I've never grown before. And I was recently on holiday in the Lake District, and there's a large garden centre there, and I was particularly drawn to this packet of flower seeds. This is a flower called Bellis, and the variety is called Single White. Now, this flower is described as a sun-loving dwarf cousin to the daisy family, and it's good for ground cover. So that makes it great for flower beds, rock gardens, and also it says that it self-seeds really easily as well. And I do like varieties that do that will just produce flowers year after year. So I am going to give this a try for the first time this year. In fact, if you've grown Bellis yourself before, let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, I'll give you an update on the progress of this in a future video, so you can see how it's growing. Something else I liked about this when I read the back of the packet was it said it does like shady areas. Now, most flowers will thrive in sunny areas, and we've all got those areas of our flower garden that don't get full sunshine, and these are the types of flowers that you can grow in those areas. So the packet recommends sowing the seeds in a well prepared shady area to a depth of around about 6mm, which is 1/4 of an inch. When the seedlings are large enough, it's recommended that they're thinned out to around about 10 to 15cm or 4 to 6 inches apart. Now what's interesting is when you read the packet, it says that it's good to sow them in shady areas, but it does recommend transplanting them into partial sunshine, so that's interesting. So maybe they germinate better in cooler temperatures and then they'll thrive in slightly warmer environments. So when they're large enough, I will transplant them into an area of my flower garden that does get partial sunshine. So Bellis, a variety called Single White, is my experiment for a flower that I've not grown before that I will be sowing in August. Now my final recommendation for a flower to sow in August is a flower that you'll see all over my garden during the summer, and that's a flower called Coleus. This is a variety called Rainbow Mix. Now the reason I love Coleus so much is that they don't produce the vibrant oranges and reds and whites and yellows of other flowers, but the foliage gives you this range of greens and purples that provides so much contrast to the flower bed and provides a fantastic backdrop for the other flowers. Now, one of the big differences with sowing Coleus in August is they have to be sown indoors. This is not a flower that will survive through the winter period, but they do make good house plants as well. So if you start these indoors and you've got a place to put them on a windowsill or somewhere in your conservatory or anywhere in your house that's got a reasonable amount of light, Coleus are perfect for sowing in August, growing them on, and then when the frosts have finished or the cooler temperatures have gone, they'll be ready for you to plant out during spring and early summer of the following year. Coleus need germination temperatures of around about 15 to 20 degrees centigrade, 59 to 70-ish Fahrenheit. So that is reasonably warm. So they might need to be started in a propagator depending upon what temperatures are in your local area and when you sow them. If you do sow them at those temperatures, they should germinate in 14 to 28 days. Now, as I've mentioned, I am going to be sowing them in trays and I'm going to be putting them in pots and keeping them indoors over the winter period during the harshest of the temperatures. And when the temperature is warm enough, I'll transplant them into their final positions at around about 25 centimetres or 10 inches apart in the outside garden. Coleus are always worth growing and may be a flower that you should think about sowing in August. So there you have my 11 varieties of flowers that you should think about sowing in August. And what a variety they are, such a range of different colours, of varieties, of fragrances that really will enhance your flower garden. If you do plant these seeds in August, I promise you'll be pleased with the rewards you'll get in spring or early summer next year. And I really hope that's given you one or two ideas. And this is by no means exhaustive. I'm sure there are plenty of other flowers that you could sow in August. And it'd be fantastic if you could let me know what you'd be sowing in August in your flower garden and put them in the comments below. And that would be great for people who watch the video and read the comments to get further ideas. But I'd like to thank you very much for watching the video. And if you did enjoy the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit, vegetables and flowers and one or two recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you all on the next video.